This is the Unregistered podcast, and I'm Thaddeus Russell. This is a show about ideas, people, and behaviors that are considered inappropriate, out of bounds, or beyond the pale. The things you're not supposed to talk about if you're a school teacher, a college professor, a businessman, a politician, a parent, a neighbor, or even a podcast host. These are the things you're not supposed to say or even think if you're a good liberal, a good conservative, or a good citizen. Each week, I'll interview a person who has something bad to say. They might be a journalist or a professor. They might be a porn star or a drug dealer. They might just be an ordinary person with an ordinary job who doesn't care about the rules of polite society. I'm not interested in breaking the rules just to be a troublemaker. I'm interested in people who break the rules of conventional thought and to expand the scope of what is possible to say in our society. I'm interested in people who make me think. My guest this week is the host of Against Everyone with Conner Habib. He is a former academic and a former porn star. He's also one of my very favorite people to talk to. This is my interview with Conner Habib. So I was driving with my girlfriend from Salem to Portland 2 days ago, and Conner Habib came up in conversation. I don't remember why. And she asked me what you, Conner, look like. And I said, oh, well, here, let me show you. So I did a quick Google image search, and she almost wrecked the car.
out of rage.
She was driving. That's how stupid I was. I showed her your porn pictures, like your porn promo pictures, not actual porn, but like the box cover.
Yeah.
Stills, yeah. And I held up the phone in front of her face while she's driving on the I-5 when it was raining too. So you're partly responsible, I think, for my near death.
Oh, finally.
But my goodness, man, you are you're something.
Thank you. I always wanted to be something.
Let me also say, I had a long discussion with her about how to handle my discussions generally with sex workers, because I've had like 5 or 6 sex workers on the show, and they've all been completely straight in terms of the rapport I have with the people, in terms of how I deal. In other words, there's no reference to each other's bodies or how people look or really our own sexual desires in any way, or anybody's attractiveness or lack of attractiveness. It's just, it is purely policy, politics, culture, ideas, intellectual stuff, right? Like no flirtation at all, right? And because I assumed, well, there's a lot of good reasons for that.
Is that what you think?
Well, no, right. So what do you mean?
I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
Wait, what?
Is that what you think, that there's no flirtation?
Oh, yeah, right. So here I am with an expert. So let me just ask you, because I can think of some reasons why, just sort of strategic reasons, right? Why sex workers who are activists or intellectuals would not want to go there with interviewers, because they want to present sort of the assimilated, in a sense, front. Right. They want to sort of, on one level, you want to present the image of being safe to America so that America will accept you and give you civil rights. Right. The old strategy. But then I said, and that's very important to me, and I get that, and I will honor that if that's what's necessary in the moment. But then again, I also thought, and I said this to her, well, but the whole point, in a way, politically here, is to break down all those barriers, right? And this is where you are very strong on this, right? Especially, I think, even among sex workers. It's kind of your thing, right? You want to say sex is not such a big deal, and we need to eliminate these artificial barriers between sex and the rest of our lives.
Right. Well, there is a very real respectability politics among sex workers. So even now, as the sex work is work movement gains traction, and we'll talk about some of the challenges that we've been facing recently, I'm sure. But this idea of decriminalizing sex work, it's absolutely necessary for us to enter into this realm of language of sex work as work, I think, for a lot of reasons, to frame things as a labor struggle. And on the other hand, there is a way in which that's hiding. And I I would love if we had sort of front loaded organizing around sex work is sex and work. And how do we change the landscape for both those things? But that didn't happen. And so now the sort of on the ground political struggle in front of us is a labor struggle, which I think, it's pretty successful. But the thing that's even more problematic for me is not the sex workers doing that, because that's fine. But the people who are adopting sex work as a kind of cause. So I'm really glad that some socialists, for instance, and libertarians are paying attention to sex work right now. Finally, socialists seem to be caring about it in mass in a way.
In a good way.
Yes, exactly.
They've cared about it in bad ways.
Yeah,
yes.
Exactly. They've done their weird faux Marxist analyses of porn commodity fetish, blah, blah, blah.
Just quickly, let's do that.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's an idea that, how do I just break it down in the most simple terms? It's just that Marxism absorbed sex work, exclusionary radical feminism, that this idea that people are turning themselves into objects by being, in porn, and they're not even really workers anymore.
Mm-hmm. Well, the line for socialists for about 100 plus years has been that prostitution, sex work will cease to exist once there is socialism, because then women, and they only had women in mind, will no longer need to sell themselves in such degrading ways. Right. That was actually, believe it or not, go look up what Emma Goldman, of all people, said about prostitution. Have you ever read that?
No.
It's really depressing because
what a bummer.
I thought she would have been the one who was good on this. That was exactly her argument. Well,
I mean, I would, though, maybe say, in fairness to Emma Goldman, she might have been reaching for something that was a little out of her grasp, which is, yes. I think she probably would have supported sexual liberation, real sexual liberation, and a post-work society, in which case I kind of understand the critique, because if the only way really to get rid of sex work is to get rid of work and to change our definition of sex, and then you don't have sex work anymore. So if she was trying to do that, that's fine. Or like, Marx, people like to say that he was anti-sex work. And I think, you can make a case for that. But he also was, he said something about how workers were, prostituted or whatever. But basically what he was trying to say, everybody
is a prostitute.
Yes, it's not that.
Which I like. That I agree with that.
Yes, that's actually okay for me too. Yeah. So
I said that to a student in a class at Occidental College once. That was the only time I've ever been. There was a formal complaint filed against me ever. Because I said, I was developing this whole argument. It wasn't like I just dropped it in the middle of a lecture, but we'd had these conversations for, many, many days, in fact. And there was a little bit of resistance from one student, young woman, and she said something like, well, I said, but doesn't everyone sell their body? And she said, no, I don't. I mean, it's different. And I said, well, so when you were a waitress, because she was a waitress, I said, weren't you essentially being a prostitute? Oh. And next day I got an email from the chair of my department. But she stayed in the class. It's all fine.
Oh, that's good.
But it's to me, it's just indisputable that all work is the selling of one's body.
Well, your body is utilized, right? I think interestingly, we live in a time now where work looks less like using your body for more people than ever before. And I think that actually is a fundamental difference in work. Mm-hmm. Right now, we have a sort of mono positionality. So you have people sitting in these weird
mono positionality.
Like they look like, like they're sitting in their chairs, and the things that are moving are their fingers and their eyes.
Yeah.
And so if you look if you want to sort of imagine looking into workplaces now, you don't see people utilizing their bodies in all these different ways. Of course, there are still some people that do that, but even they very often have this sitting at the computer component to their job at some point. Mm-hmm. So it's becoming more and more like factory farming, almost. It's like the Matrix. Everybody's just hooked up to this thing and, moving their body in very sort of limited ways. So the action is in a lot of ways taking place mentally. So I can see why people would maybe more than ever try to make that argument that somehow sex work is different, but that's just an amplification of hatred for the working class. Like, oh, you're using your body in a way that's not sitting like an L and moving your fingers and your eyeballs. Like, you must be exploited, you must be brainwashed or whatever, when in fact it's really the opposite.
So I was recently anally penetrated by a doctor.
Okay. Okay.
Audience, I'm sorry, I should have given you a warning. Yeah, no, I was, because I'm a man of a certain age, and afterward I was thinking, gee,
sure.
What? Why isn't that, considered to be, dangerous and degrading and damaging and exploitative? And
well, even
for him, because he had to do it. And imagine
he had to.
And hey, I mean, for me, of course, it was a great pleasure for him. But just kidding. No, but imagine all the people he has to do that for.
Think about how many people dentists have oral sex with every single day.
Oh yeah, and I was just at the dentist the other day too, and boy, was she in my mouth. But it's true.
For hours.
It's true. Yeah.
So how did we get here? Because I was talking about Marxists absorbing what anti-sex work people say. So, and then what? How do we? I think you were asking me.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, that was my.
That's okay.
Trademark digression.
Yeah, no, it was a good digression, an important one, but
Marxists and libertarians are starting to starting to pay attention to sex work now.
Yeah,
because of what's been going on in the Congress.
Right. So but so even socialists who are sort of now coming to our aid or whatever, they're still masking their assistance in the respectability politics of labor rather than talking about sex at all. And sexual liberation is not part of the socialist agenda for sure. It's not even part of the libertarian agenda. I mean, I think there's more of a chance of it happening there in some ways, but I think, as you brought up when we talked on my show,
right,
that a lot of libertarians just adopt fundamentalist morals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's a split. I'd say it's about half and half. About half libertarians don't want to even talk about it. And if they were forced to, they would probably they would have the right position, but they don't want to talk about it. I've had this experience. Some people know what I'm talking about. But I'd say roughly half of libertarians are very good on this, actually. Like the LP, I think it's even been in their official platform since the beginning, since the 1970s.
But good at this.
Meaning full decriminalization.
Well, sure, but we have to sort of pull back from that too and say, and it's not just enough to say you want sexual liberation, because the Me Too movement does that, for example. But that it's just empty posturing if we have no idea what that might mean. Because usually when people talk about sexual liberation, what they just mean is a new kind of sexual repression and oppression.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, it's the idea of constantly just sort of swapping out who's suffering for another group, because so much of it's, traced along identity politics lines. Like, okay, well, if women can just have better sex, then everything will be fine, right? Or if queers can just have sort of better sexual, people with different kinds of bodies have better kinds of sexual experiences, everything will be fine. This idea of like including people, but actually sex is way beyond identity. I mean, as an aspect of the human experience. So now you have to center sex first. You can't center the identity politics and hope that somehow they'll shore up how sex is going to work.
You have to center the sex first.
Yeah.
In your politics.
Yeah. And that's something my friend Heather Berg, she's a labor studies, she teaches labor studies in a gender studies department at USC. And she's just so brilliant about it. She's like, when you're studying sex work, and she's a Marxist, but when you're studying sex work, you have to start with sex, and then Marxism can be a slant of what you're studying. You can't start with Marxism, otherwise you erase the entirety of the experience of what's actually happening.
Yeah, then I don't know how she's a Marxist, but I mean, that's for the Marxists to decide. But I don't run that club anymore. But I would kick her out if I did. So, right? I mean, because for them, it's class is first.
Well,
and material conditions and economics are always first.
I mean, maybe unless you think of Yes, and it's one of the big disagreements that she and I have. Ultimately, the sort of bottom of things is, I think that sex and desire precede labor as a motivating force for why people do things, and precede economics. So she wouldn't say that, but I think she could say what she says about sex work totally reasonably, and then just say, but Marxism is my tactic. For Marxism, my tactic afterwards.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what does that mean for you? What does it mean that sex and desire are first for your politics? What does that mean?
Okay. Well, I mean, they're first in the human experience, right? We want things, and we don't want things, and we don't even always know what we want. Or don't want. Sometimes we're reaching for things without understanding that there are desires. Sometimes we are repulsed by things, but we actually want them. Mm-hmm. In fact, I would say
that's a good one.
I would say all things
one of my favorite
we're
categories.
repulsed by are things we want.
That should be like a Jeopardy category.
Right, exactly.
Things you think you're repulsed by, but you actually desire them. Can we talk about that for a second?
Sure.
Do you have some good examples ready? Because I have one.
Okay, so
here you go.
I think a really easy example is when you get in a fight with your partner, right? So like you're fighting with your boyfriend or your girlfriend or whatever, and you think it's because there's conflict there, and you don't want that conflict, and you want to solve a problem, but actually it's because you've not had a sense of connection to the person. So you amplify these feelings, and you're both in them, and you're both screaming. And so suddenly you're connected. Now, the really interesting thing is then a lot of times that fight can create a sort of wound and drive you further apart. So then you have to fight again to get the feeling again, right? So you keep reproducing to get what you want, even though it appears to be in a form that you don't want.
Mm-hmm. That's not repulsion, is it?
I mean, I'm just in terms of attraction, repulsion.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about someone seeing like a spider throwing up on a vulture or something like that.
That's what I was thinking. I was thinking of the grotesque.
Yeah.
The things that we are trained to be repulsed by.
Right.
Right. Like, this is what I had in mind. Fatness.
Okay.
Fat people.
Oh, uh-huh.
That's just one example. There's many. Well, here's another one. Homosexuality. Right?
Sure.
That's the classic.
Yeah.
I think we've covered that fairly well in our conversations. But of course we can talk about that. But yeah, I mean, the number of men, the evidence is pretty clear that there's a lot of men out there, heterosexual men, who prefer so-called larger women, fat women, even obese women, and hide it. And hide that fact. There's evidence mounting all the time. You can see it on Pornhub, right?
Sure.
All the subgenres, BBW is huge, so to speak. But also there's actual data. I think Seth Davidovitz Stevens, who was on my show, has some of that data, but other people have produced it. I've seen references to it of surveys of men in which they talk about what they really like and what they talk about liking.
Right.
Sexually.
Yeah, totally.
And there's a big difference, right?
And we don't always know. I mean, we shouldn't frame it in terms of, well, they're hiding it out of, and I'm not saying you're doing this, but hiding it out of a desire to, like, they actually know that they're hiding it because they don't want anybody to shame them. A lot of times we're not actually in touch with what we know. I think another example, or what we want, I think another example is Donald Trump. He's a great example of something that we think that we don't want, but maybe we want. And my friend Peter Rollins points this out really well. He's like, do you see all those signs during the election that said love Trump's hate? He's like, yeah, do you love Trump's hate? And so even the way that it pours out into our rhetoric, that's not just a game. That's, people have developed theories over like the way we express things. It's this Freudian concept that you can't help but express what you want all the time, So why might we want that? And I think it's actually more productive to think of ourselves as wanting everything that we get. Not because it's always true necessarily. I just think it's better to think about it that way. What might I have done to bring this on? Because it brings a sense of total responsibility to you. So
I love that.
I think, so that's one of the reasons why I also thinking about desire and sex is useful to me. Not just as some concept, but it's like, it creates a sense of total, I need to look at myself in every situation to see what I did. And people might confuse this and be like, oh, well, you're blaming everybody. So then if someone gets cancer, they wanted the cancer. Well, no, we don't have to talk about it that way. It doesn't have to be a sense of like, you're to blame. I'm just saying, look at the factors that might have conspired here, you know, and see where you might have been involved. And there might be all kinds of places where you can't see that you're involved, and you don't have to take all that on all the time, you know.
Oh, wait, what about cancer?
Oh, well, just the classic example that people would retaliate with is when I say...
Right, so what's your answer?
Oh, what's my cancer answer? Well, first I would say, you know, there's a big difference between... Yeah. Okay, so there's a version.
Postmodern alert.
Yes.
Postmodern alert. Warning, Will Robinson.
Postmodern, because it's Freudian too. So if you so in one way we could really say that our deaths are the project of our unconsciousness our entire lives, because our unconsciousness knows that we're going to die. It's always anxious about it, even when it's not. So it's constantly assembling the factors that will lead to our death throughout our lives, whether that's eating candy constantly, or, you know, running up cliffs, or, you know, doing things that might lead to our demise, and we're constantly drawn to it. Smoking. Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. So in some ways we might take total responsibility in that sense, but our unconscious isn't accessible to us. So how can we call it responsibility? It's not quite the right word.
I bet this argument goes over really well with your gay friends.
When
AIDS comes up. Oh. Right? Yeah. Because you're making Pat Robertson's argument.
Oh, that
in a sense
that gay people somehow brought it upon themselves.
But you're of course going 1,000 miles farther than he would, right? So you agree with the claim basically that gay people, you know, this happened to them because of their own actions, that they are responsible for AIDS.
I'm saying that we can look at factors of responsibility when we want, you know.
Wait a second. If they didn't have sex with each other, there would have been no AIDS, correct?
Well, I don't know that I would agree with it stated that way.
Really?
Yeah, I would say that first of all, not all gay people got AIDS. Okay, and lots of them
right.
had
But
sex.
if there was no homosexual sex between 1979 and now, there would be no AIDS. Correct?
I can't answer that question definitively. That's asking me to do like this total contingent, like,
or gay. Or I should say that there would have been no AIDS among gay men.
Okay. I know what you're asking, which is, had not gay men had sex in the way that they did, AIDS wouldn't have played out historically the way that it did. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's what you're saying, and that I can agree with, because that's tautological. Like, if it didn't happen the way it did, it wouldn't have happened the way it did. You know, so that sure, that's fine. I can agree with that.
Well, wait,
but you're also saying, is there a responsibility there, and isn't that sort of lining you up with Pat Robertson in some sort of way? I will agree that we have to look at factors of responsibility, which in fact is what public health did, right? Mm-hmm. Like, but I think also there are also other factors that will always be inaccessible to us, and it's interesting and important for us to look at how those might be ways that our own desires play out as well. But I would not do what Pat Robertson or anyone like him would do, which is to bring a question of blame and guilt into it, because these factors play out in every aspect of our lives, not just the disastrous bad ones, but also the good ones, not just the disastrous bad ones that happen to some communities, but if, you know, Pat Robertson's house like set on fire or whatever, you would equally be like, well, you know, and he would place that in God. And what I'm doing is placing that in the unconscious and our behaviors and all that sort of stuff.
Okay. So the causal analysis though is essentially the same, which is that gay sex caused gay AIDS, right? I mean, now the answer you have to the problem is obviously radically different, which is for you, I think it's not to stop having gay sex or to stop having sex. For him, it is. That's the answer. It's to stop having gay sex, stop being gay. That's the answer. For you, it is don't give up on your desire. I mean, What is it?
Well, but also see,
What is the answer to the AIDS crisis?
well, it's
Conner Habib.
in the past, the answer would be different than it is now. But the gay. I would not say that gay sex leads to gay AIDS. I would also say that the suppression of homosexuality, the repression and the sexual repression and the oppression, the way that the CDC and the government and their desires played out in those situations also led to the way that these complex social situations played out. So it's not just the desires of the person who contracts the disease. It's also all the other pathways that are of desire that are coming into that situation, meeting in this tangle of different kinds of repression and repression.
Okay, so it's multi-causal.
Yes.
For you. Okay, so your causal analysis is actually different.
Yes.
For him, it's monocausal.
Right.
And for you, it's multi-causal.
Yeah, my ideologies are more promiscuous than his too.
Yeah, that's actually what I was saying, which is that your answer is, so one, it's true. If we had truly abolished homosexuality, right, in the 1970s, then there would have been at least no AIDS among gay men, right? True. So that's one answer, right? That's the Pat Robertson answer.
You can always destroy people to save them, sure.
Yeah. So, but then we found out that, first of all, there are lots and lots of desires for lots and lots of things that it turns out can have harmful effects, right? You name it, you consume it in certain ways or too much of it, it will hurt you, right? Well, we found out that there are all sorts of ways to mitigate those effects and continue to indulge our pleasure, our desires, right? Including gay sex, right? So condoms was number one, but then much, much better was drugs that essentially eliminate HIV, right? Or basically make it, almost insignificant.
And in some ways might be resetting the stage for something like HIV to happen again.
Sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, so in other words, the desire won ultimately.
It always wins because there's nothing outside. There's nothing outside of it.
Here we are now, and you can have gay sex pretty safely now, right? And not have to worry about it anymore.
Yeah.
Look at that. Like, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And if we had renounced desire, right? That never would have happened. The scientific advances, the technological advances, the medical advances would not have happened because there would have been no motivation. Because there would have been no sex that was a problem.
And the places where, and there are places in the world where we haven't cared enough about people's desires, so people are still dying, right?
So I'm saying your desire is why we have those drugs.
Well, right. I mean, would I have mitigated it with drugs? I think that there probably have been better ways to do it.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So but yes, I know what you're saying. Yeah. So, but the point being too, something that my desire would have created was clear communication from the CDC before 2013 or whatever, when they released the statistics of how easy it was or difficult it was to get HIV from certain acts, right? So they finally released these numbers so recently that was showed just how completely difficult it was to get HIV from anything other than unprotected anal sex where you come inside your partner.
Right.
But they would not release that information. So, I'm of this generation where someone gave me a blowjob and I would freak out that I got HIV from that because no one would give me a straight answer about that. So that's my desire would have been for clear communication, especially because I grew up where communication was completely strangled around sexuality, right? So, or maybe not. Maybe I desire the repression. Maybe I desire the silence on my own right. I don't know.
Yeah, so you're moving from Freud to Foucault, right? So for Freud, for Foucault, we desire our own. Some people desire their own repression. Even I guess Freud would say that too, in a sense, right? Yeah. Right.
Yeah, we all desire our own repression, and that's Wilhelm Reich too, who Foucault and Deleuze and Guattari were fine with, although they don't reference him enough, where he was like, what if people want their own oppression? And I do think that's correct. I think we do. And so the best thing to do is begin experimenting with your desires, understanding sex, understanding what you want and what you don't want. And that's psychoanalysis's political project. So you can see why why do I keep recapitulating these oppressions and these bad things, right? So let's make it a little more concrete so people can get it too. It's like, why, if I have my sort of Arab identity and I'm on Twitter and someone says some anti-Arab thing and it bothers me, so I tell them to fuck off, and then 100 of their dumb anti-Muslim, even though I'm not Muslim, like, scumbag pals show up and they start insulting me and piling on, and I'm like, well, no, fuck you and fuck you and fuck you and fuck you and fuck you. And so suddenly I'm just like in this constant battle, and it's always, and I feel I have to do it, and yet it feels so terrible. That's a perfect example of me sort of engaging in my and reproducing the conditions of my own oppression. I struck that first blow not to shut that person up, but to bring more of it upon myself.
Yeah. When I was in 3rd and 4th grade, I was in a pretty much all black school in Oakland called Peralta Elementary School. And I would walk to school in the morning and announce to everybody who could hear me, there is no such thing as God. And then about 4 or 5 black kids would pummel me, force me to the ground. Not really hard to like really injure me, but basically like I would be, they would submit me, I'd be submitted to them, and it kind of beat me up, rough me up. And I did this on a regular basis. I would sort of like make fun of the toughest kid in school also, to sort of egg him on to fight me. And I was this little tiny skinny kid. And yeah, clearly I wanted that, I wanted to be somehow beaten up in some way.
And to see if God would save you.
It's fun. Well, wow, this is a long thing about like my relationship with black people historically, but yeah, there's an interesting complex web there, right? Like, what was that all about? I've been thinking about that a lot because my ideas about black people and blackness and my relationship with them has been changing recently. But anyway, yeah. So I think, well, then obviously the homosexual stuff is so obvious. It's so, all the obvious stuff is like the Republican congressmen who get caught in the bathroom,
right? Totally
giving a blowjob, et cetera, who after denouncing gay marriage, blah blah blah.
Right.
So yeah. Okay, so we get what we want, or everything we get is what we want.
Right. We don't we don't ever really get what we want because our wanting is completely unfulfillable. It's like if you get a car, you're very excited about getting the car, but then you have buyer's remorse, right? Or if you want this job so badly, and then you get it and you just start complaining. It's like the idea of getting what you want. Well, when you get it, you can't want it anymore. So you want to keep wanting. That's the idea. Is like this perpetual cycle of wanting. So it's like someone who's been in a relationship and they just complained and complained and complained about their partner. And you're like, girl, get the fuck out of that relationship. He sucks. Like, get out of it. So then she gets out of it and she's like, oh, thank God. And everybody's so proud of her. You're proud of your friend. You're happy. Then down the line, she meets someone else and that person just seems so awesome. And then she starts making the same exact kinds of complaints about this completely different human being. And you notice that actually the complaints are she's trying to recreate the situation that she understood. That's what we do with governments. That's what we do with elected officials. We do with politicians, all in our own ways. It might be to recreate the savior that we thought we had. It might be to recreate the oppressor, the father, right? The mother. It could be a lot of things, but we're always trying to recreate whatever that pattern of wanting. Yeah. So we can never get what we want.
And what's your prescription for us who do this?
Well, I mean, want your wanting. That's the first thing. Not your having, but your wanting.
Embrace your desire
in
Is that
your
right?
unfulfillable desire.
Yeah.
So like
Embrace the desire itself.
Yes.
The desire itself.
Yes.
Okay.
So want that feeling of longing and just recognize, oh, I appreciate and I want this. That's really fucking hard for people to do.
Yeah, because it's liminal, right? It's in between.
It's not
wanting.
a thing.
You're not there yet.
Yes.
Right? You're not without the desire, but you also you haven't fulfilled the desire, so you're in between.
So something people will probably listen to this and be like, basically, dude, you're just saying like it's about the journey, not the destination. I mean, I am kind of just saying that, you know, it you know, in a way it really is, but people don't really know what that means. Like what they tend to think when they say that is just a segmenting into smaller destinations. So it's like, well, yeah, it's not about going to the Grand Canyon. It's about stopping at all the cool sites along the way. That's just a different version of destinations.
But I was going to say, where does that come from? Is that Hinduism or Buddhism?
I don't know.
It's one of those, right?
Oh, okay.
Something like that. Well, I mean, it's sort of...
I thought it was like Ken Kesey or something.
Well, I mean, he was influenced by Zen Buddhism. I mean, it sounds a little bit like Zen Buddhism to me. You know, embrace the journey, right, instead of the destination.
Yeah.
What you're saying runs totally counter to Buddhism, right? Which is about renouncing, or not renouncing, but what is their word? It's renouncing desire. I think it is renouncing desire. I think it is asceticism, right? I mean, it's Thich Nhat Hanh, who's a very famous Vietnamese Zen Buddhist monk, right? Said that he was asked what he does with his sexual desires. He says, I just smile at them. Right. And then implying that he just sort of puts them away.
Well, or maybe he's saying, no, I see that they're there and I appreciate their presence, which would be sort of similar to what I'm saying. But yeah, I mean, I object to the Buddhist notion that we're supposed to get rid of desire.
Yeah, but he doesn't fuck. You do.
Right.
Right. So there is a renunciation there.
Yeah.
He's cutting it off, right?
So to speak.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, he's not embracing the desire. It's putting it away, isn't it? I mean, I think that's what mindful meditation teaches you.
I think Buddhists of some schools of Buddhism, because there are really lusty Buddhisms.
This is true.
Would say that, you know, I mean, that it's that basic tenet, like the world is, you know, suffering is created by desire. Get rid of your desire, and then you're no longer suffering, right? So I would say, no, you don't want to get rid of your desire. That's ridiculous. And also in some ways,
well, wait, why is it ridiculous? Thich Nhat Hanh has been a monk for like 90 years.
He's doing great. But I think it's a question of, and this may sound essentialist to you, but I think it's a question of, is that appropriate for Westerners? I think that people with different histories have different responsibilities.
But you don't mean biologically, right?
No, I don't mean biologically.
You mean our culture?
Culturally.
It's simply impossible or nearly impossible to do that in Western culture.
We have different cultural histories, and there might be, but I might mean it essentially in a spiritual sense, but not a biological sense, that there might be a different spiritual destiny.
Sure, desire is just a different thing in our culture than it is in Vietnamese culture.
Yeah.
If there is such a thing as a Vietnamese culture, you know.
Yeah.
Whichever Vietnamese subculture he's from, you know.
Sure.
I'm sure there's many, many, many of them, but different, right? Desire is thought of differently. It's acted on differently. It's regulated differently. It's experienced differently.
Totally.
It's applied to different things.
And people grow up in different religions here. There's a different understanding of that Buddhist path of development in places where that's the cultural conversation, so on and so forth. I mean, there are just so many reasons why not having that proliferated or embedded in our culture makes it less accessible to us and makes other things maybe more accessible to us.
Yeah, but so embracing the pleasure, you know, in itself, you're not saying it shouldn't be treated teleologically. In other words, you are saying, yes, complete the journey and have sex, right?
Yeah, you could.
You're not just saying sit there in your desire and don't act on it.
Oh, you could do either if you wanted.
Okay.
Do you want to be sexually frustrated or not? You know, I sometimes like being sexually frustrated. Okay. I like, you know, getting in long text messaging with someone who lives in Toronto for a long time and being like, oh my gosh, if only I could meet you. Here's an 8,000th picture of my balls, you know, like, you know, and like sort of whipping up this fantasy. But I recognize that that's what I'm doing.
Right.
And I enjoy that in the doing it.
Rather than feeling ashamed
Yes.
of your desire.
Yes,
which is what
exactly.
we mostly do, right?
Yes.
We mostly feel ashamed of our desires.
And part of that too is part of the shame comes from thinking you have to consummate every single desire you have, because like you feel like a failure for not having achieved it. So if I'm texting the guy from Toronto and I live in LA and I know in my head I'm probably never going to meet him, you know, but I think I have to enjoy this moment. And if it's not going somewhere, I'm lying to him, I'm lying to myself. It's a blah, blah, blah. Instead of just thinking, no, this is actually like this interplay is actually giving me something. This in itself is nice. Then I'm going to start feeling a tremendous amount of shame for what's going on. Now, I mean, it doesn't mean you lie to the person and you say, I'll be there next week. And then you don't go, you don't catfish the person. I just don't catfish yourself either, you know?
Can we for a minute speculate, sort of do an educated speculation on how much shame is experienced by people about their desires? Like the different kinds of desires that are experienced and shamed. We don't know because we're not inside everyone's heads, but you know, we do know we do know which desires are shamed by the culture, right? That's really clear. So I am thinking of something that Roman Polanski said.
Okay.
So I'm about to break the internet.
He's a good person to bring up.
I'm about to break the internet. You ready? Here we go. So Roman Polanski famously, of course, well, everyone knows this, right? He's in exile because he can't come back to the United States because he was convicted of rape of a 13-year-old girl, who, by the way, still, and she's now in her 40s, I think, has said, she has said, what has she said? I'm pretty sure she said she wasn't raped. I know she said that he should not be convicted. She does not want him to be punished for it.
Yeah,
I'm not sure if she uses
multiple times
the word rape, but anyway, it doesn't matter. The point here is he said this about it because people were saying, God, how could anyone want to have sex with a 13-year-old girl? And he said, what? Everybody wants to have sex with girls.
Sure, yeah.
Everybody wants the girls, which was taken as evidence that he is the worst human being who's ever lived. That statement was considered to be even worse than what he did with the girl.
Yeah, that would, I mean, and I'm fine saying that the demonization of that comment is preposterous. There's been, if you just want to be scientific about it, there's a great book called What Women Want by Daniel Bergner, who, you know,
oh yeah,
he shows
someone else just referenced this to me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, he's great. There are some things in there that I don't agree with, but he has an even better book called The Other Side of Desire.
Janet Capron.
Oh, okay.
She referenced it. Yeah.
So in that, there's just study after study of men responding, you know, scientifically proven, whatever. However, if that's the narrative you need to permit this for some reason, to be attracted to young, like women who are teenagers, right? So girls. So what the problem for me with the whole thing is, like, we should separate Polanski and his acts and evaluate that however you want to, based on whatever information is there, from the idea that we're not allowed to sexualize or imagine sexualizing certain people. Our imaginations are the only thing we have. The only thing that's like could be they're still touched and affected and shaped by culture and power, people and institutions in power, but they're ours. And this idea that we're not allowed sexualize whoever you want imaginatively. It's just that sexualize whoever you want.
Good luck, Conner.
Think of like the worst, most horrible things you want sexually. I don't care.
Yeah.
Not only do I not care, it's your absolute right to do that. When you talk about enacting them, that's a whole different thing. And we know this. I mean, people feel completely comfortable imagining mowing down a whole park full of people with a machine gun. But then you say something like, oh, I had a dream about having sex with a 15-year-old last night, and it's a huge problem, you know? So we need to be able to recognize and see how important the imagination is and the freedom of the imagination is.
Did you know about the guy who played Puck in Glee?
Oh, yeah, who killed himself.
Yes. He hanged himself from a tree in front of
Yeah.
his house a couple months ago, I think.
Yeah.
He was convicted of possession,
Yeah.
just possession of child pornography.
Yeah.
Just possession. According to the law, he didn't touch anybody.
Right.
And he was going to do up to 10 years in prison.
Uh-huh.
And he hanged himself instead.
Yeah.
There is nothing worse you can do in our society than desire children sexually.
Right.
I mean, just the desire. I heard just someone the other day say something like, yeah, we really need to have the penalties much stronger for pedophilia. We got to cure that sickness.
I mean, we all desire to have sex with children at some point in our lives because we're kids, right?
Oh.
So we
Sure.
grow up wanting to have sex with children.
Right. So it is kind of strange that on our 18th birthday, we just stop.
Yeah. So I love that dinged.
I know.
I understand the laws around child pornography in the sense that if you have child pornography, you are in some ways supporting the sort of system, the proliferation, the distribution of child pornography, and thereby increasing its demand. There are sexologists who treat people who are pedophiles who have not offended ever by giving them access somehow to child pornography. It's illegal for them to do that, but they do that because they know that the person who's a pedophile is less likely to offend if they have child pornography.
Sure.
Right. So it's a complex thing. It's like if you don't want someone who's truly a pedophile, not a child molester, there's a big difference between the two. If you want someone who is truly a pedophile, which is to say that their sexuality is a fixation is maybe not the right word, but it emphasizes children, then them having some sexual outlet and somebody that they can talk to about their sexual outlet dramatically decreases the chances that they're going to offend at all.
Mm-hmm.
Most people who have sex with children are not pedophiles. So in the vast majority of these cases, it's actually not really even going to do anything. So if this guy was indeed who killed himself was indeed a pedophile, which probably if he had a lot of child pornography, he was, then him having that might have been the exact thing that stopped him from committing the acts. So it's a very complicated situation. And you also get why someone like that would kill themselves, because 10 years in prison, maybe that doesn't sound like a long time. I mean, it sounds like a really long time, of course, right? But like, if that's the worst crime in the world, but he'll be in prison the rest of his life after he gets out, for sure. I mean, he'll always be the person who was,
sure,
did the worst thing you could possibly do.
It's a life sentence,
Yes.
really.
Yeah.
Culturally.
Yeah.
Yeah. For just possession,
Yeah.
not production, not, performing, just possession of the thing.
And that could have been true if he had 3 photos.
Having pictures in his computer.
Not hundreds, but 3.
Pictures in his computer.
Yeah.
It's amazing to me.
Yeah.
So what is your position on pedophilia?
Is that it's a sexual orientation, right? Although that term itself, I think, has its own problems, but it is a sexual orientation that people can't do much about to just sort of eradicate it. So they have to do mediation in their behaviors, right? In a serious way, because here's the thing. We all do mediation in our sexual behaviors. Like, we all think about, I was just saying this before, we all think and imagine things that, like, if they were carried out, would be pretty terrible in the world, right? But someone whose sexual orientation is something that you're not allowed to even discuss without being thrown in prison.
Right.
Then those people are pressure cookers of sexual repression and intensities that need to be mediated by a professional, that they need help. And so that's one thing. Child molestation is a completely different thing, which mostly is what happens when an adult has sex with kids. It's situational, brought on by specific pressures. And those pressures may be very different. And then they have a sexual encounter with a kid for one reason or another.
Can't even tell you how many gay men have told me that their first or one of their first sexual experiences was as a child with an older man.
Yeah.
And that they loved it.
Yeah. Well, that's the Milo. This is the thing that got
Yeah.
Milo banned from
All I know,
everything.
with it's just anecdotal evidence, but it's a lot, and I'm sure you have even more, right? Of gay men saying this, right? That this happened to them when they were young, like 12, 13, and it was with a man who was in his 20s or 30s or even 40s, and they loved it.
I mean, I think it happens to lots of people. I think it happens to women a lot as well.
Yeah.
And I think,
yes, I know
yes, I know plenty of women. And I think the way to talk about the wrong way to talk about it is to approach the person who has had that sexual encounter as a minor and be like, you were raped, especially if they're saying no. And instead to say, I don't have to say that you were raped to say that something bad might have happened. Right.
Well, why do you even assume that something bad might have happened?
Well, because if we're talking about a teenager, then we're sort of out of the realm that's a realm where people develop sexually at different rates. If we're talking about a child, then the child's consciousness is completely not just sexual, but their entire consciousness is completely different than the adult's consciousness. So that to me seems to be wrong for that reason specifically, that the child has no way of mediating the complex sexual relationship that their body is not even necessarily ready for in a certain way. And so interestingly, what a lot of people report who have been molested by adults as kids is that the pain came when the adults stopped doing it. So they came close to puberty, then their body started to change, and the adult was like, no more, or maybe it wasn't puberty, but this total severing of the sexual relationship with no explanation, talking about it or whatever, creates a sense of devastating abandonment for their entire lives. And that's this. And now I'm not saying it should have gone on. I'm saying it shouldn't have started in the first place, but I'm just talking about what people.
So are you saying it's bad?
Yeah.
No, seriously.
Saying
you're sounding less radical than me and less radical than I thought you were on this question.
That someone who's a prepubescent child should having sex with an adult.
I know. I told you we're going to break the internet.
Yeah.
But, I mean,
yes. I think that's bad because a child's consciousness can't handle what's happening. So
that's universal though. You're making a universal claim for all children. That's what I'm saying.
I'm making a claim
in all circumstances.
I'm making a claim for our culture that has a certain cultural conversation around sex. Okay. Yeah. In cultures, indigenous cultures, where the entire society is set up to expect or understand certain things, I'm not going to make pronouncements on those cultures. But I'm talking about cultures where what we call child molestation happens in. So, yeah.
Right. So, I mean, our culture announces from a loudspeaker all day, every day, that a child who's had sex with an adult is damaged permanently.
Yes.
Right? So studies have shown, the same studies that you reference have shown, that what so-called victims of child molestation or child sexual abuse feel the most pain about is the relationship ending and the fact that the shame about having enjoyed it.
Right.
That is, I think, the most common response to the question of what is the pain that you're feeling. And the pain, I think, and many studies have shown that most say it's the shame from having enjoyed it.
So first of all, let's just draw a line real quickly. What we're talking about is the majority of children who have experienced molestation when they were kids. That the majority are not forcibly raped. Okay.
Right.
So when we're talking about kids who are forcibly raped, we have a different scenario.
That's
okay.
Different. Yeah.
When we're talking about child molestation, where the child is having a sexual experience with an adult, the best book to read on this is called The Trauma Myth by Susan Clancy. What she shows is that most kids are not traumatized. That's not the right term for that. That what they experience is confusion, misunderstand. They don't get what's going on. It might feel weird to them. And then when they become adults or they get older, they start to understand what has happened and they begin to it comes to light, and then something very painful happens.
Yeah.
And it's not, for me, I wouldn't just describe that to culture. So this may be a difference. I think that you don't have, if you don't understand the world of sex, which kids the adult world of sex, which kids don't, okay, and their bodies aren't working in the ways that adult bodies are working, then I think that there really is a good argument to say consent is never possible between a kid and an adult, because they're on completely different levels of consciousness. They're not even really intersecting in that correct way, right? That adults and adults would. So when the kid starts to grow up and their body starts working in a certain way, and then they begin to relate to these experiences that they had before, they're thinking, wait a second, like this is what was happening to that other person's body. I didn't even know or get that. So what the fuck, right? And that, along with a whole host of other reasons why it can be very difficult, painful, and violating, all those things start to come to the surface.
Yeah, but okay. Still seems like it's the culture telling them to feel bad about this thing.
First of all, that has to be taken into consideration. Yeah. That's not just I mean, it needs to be taken into consideration from both sides, right? Like, yes, that's true. And also, since our culture does that, that leads us to something, right?
And the fact that they didn't feel pain until they were adults and they found out what child molestation is and what that thing that happened to them was, and right, sure, according to the culture.
But it's also interesting for you to bring this up, because one of the reasons why most kids don't report being molested is because our cultural narrative is you were held down and raped by an adult, right?
Or just
when that doesn't match most kids' experiences.
It's all rape. Yeah, even if it's just manipulation, just giving them candy or something, it's all considered rape. It's all rape according to the culture.
Yeah, I mean, rape is inappropriately applied, but I would say that is sexual violation for sure, 100%. I would not. The kid,
like a prepubescent kid,
having sex with an adult. Yeah, that's total sexual violation, and I think that it really does damage kids in lots of ways. But it's just not the pathway that we talk about it. It's just not in the pathway that we normally talk about it.
I don't see why it necessarily damages a kid. It could. It depends on the circumstances. Depends on who does it and who the kid is and all sorts of things. But necessarily, I don't get it. I don't see that. So if it's because it can't be consensual because the power relation is so imbalanced, fine.
It's not power. I'm not talking about power.
Okay.
I'm talking about consciousness structures. That's a different way of talking about it for me. So I think that the typical way of talking about why it would be rape is usually wrong, and it actually damages people far more who have had those experiences. So think about it this way. Some kid is 7 years old, has repeated sexual contact with someone that's in their 40s, okay? And it feels good to them, bodily pleasurable and arousing, which is what many, many kids report. All the narratives around them say, no, go and tell someone you trust. First of all, assume it's a stranger, not someone in the family, which it almost always is. Tell them that it's got to be violating and feel horrible, which a lot of times it doesn't. And tell them that like they didn't ask for it. You didn't bring this upon yourself, when sometimes kids elicit the behavior. So then they see all that and they're like, shit, it was my fault. It was my fault. It was my fault. I know that other people have been molested, but that's not the experience that I had. And so they never tell anybody. They never talk about it with anybody. They're told not to talk about it with anybody. So that repression damages them. The lack of their experience in the cultural narrative damages them. Yeah. The fact that the adult never expresses or goes through the complex thing that is happening between the two of them damages them. The fact that their body can't understand what the other person's body is doing damages them. The fact that they only learn that later damages them. So these are all the ways in which this ends up being an intense sexual violation. And I think it is a sexual violation every time because of that. And I'm not going to say to someone who had this experience as a kid, you were violated and whatever. If they're like, no, I wasn't. It's not up to me, right? But my perspective as towards the general structure of these experiences is that it's a sexual
I agree
violation.
with all of that.
Yeah.
Heartily. It's just that I think that your proscription against it generally is what undergirds all of that, all those problems, right? That we assume it is necessarily a bad thing to do. So I don't know.
We really talked about this for a long time, but it's not the assumption it's not the assumption, it's the way that we discuss
we talked about it for a long time. I need to say this.
Yeah.
It is at the base of everything.
100%.
No, and I'm talking about child sexuality.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
totally.
So it has to be talked about.
Yes,
and it's never
I know.
talked about.
I know.
Gail Rubin, who is the first to do it in 1984 with her great essay.
Yeah.
What was it called? Rethinking Sex?
Yeah, I think it's just called Thinking Sex, isn't
Thinking
it?
Sex?
I don't know. Maybe it's Rethinking Sex.
Yeah, so she raised it in 1984 in this essay. It's incredible. I used to assign it in my classes all the time,
essay.
and my students would have meltdowns about it, and she didn't even come straight out, I don't think, and say explicitly that we should abolish all the age of consent laws, but I mean that's where the argument's going. There's no doubt about it. And she even defends NAMBLA in it. But she certainly raises all these questions, and it's at the heart of everything. I mean, the fact that we construct this brick wall with barbed wire on top of it between 17 years and 364 days and 18 years, right?
Well, that I agree is I agree is
you
crazy.
You are not sexual, and no person is allowed to have sex with you. And after then, it's fine.
Right, that's
obviously
and that's not
arbitrary.
even universal in Western culture.
Thank you. So
right.
I raise these examples all the time. So in Europe, it's like 13, 14, and 15 are the ages.
In Japan, it's 13. Not in Tokyo,
Korea,
but in Japan.
it's 13.
Yeah.
Spain, it's 13. Yeah.
Well, and
in France, I just read it. There's no longer a law at all.
There are countries that have better laws, like and I don't know if they do this anymore, but Holland had a law for a while where I think it was Holland. This is in Judith Levine's excellent book, Harmful to Minors, where your ability to revoke consent is available to you for a certain period of time. So any sexual encounter that happens before a certain age, you have up until a certain time to sort of say, no, actually, I did not consent to that. So there's this sort of sliding scale. I'm not saying that's a foolproof system, but it allows for the variability in readiness in teenagers, essentially. It gives them some more agency on whether or not their view of the experience is going to change, And so I think that that's really great. But I think we're focusing too much on whether or not the child is damaged right now and not talking about why adults want to have sex with kids.
Yeah.
Right? So so we need to talk about that too. Like if there's
Roman Polanski's claim.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So again, and 13 is right on that edge of acceptability in the sense of any consent laws anywhere in the world, right? Or age of consent anywhere in the world. But when we're talking about adults having sex with prepubescent kids, like we need to question like what's happening here. This is not the Roman Polanski claim. Roman Polanski wasn't claiming that don't people want to have sex with 8-year-olds. That's not what he was saying. And
I think he just said little, I don't know if he said little girls. He said girls.
Yeah. I mean, but it was
in reference to his case. So
yes. And I took
it to mean,
I don't think it means
quote underage. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think it means children.
Prepubescent,
I don't think he's like talking about Henry Darger, imaginative world. I think that we have, a different question to ask people in those cases, not just why do you want to have sex with someone? That's whatever. But do you have to do it? And if the answer is yes, then you have a complicated problem on your hands, So
I think about all these like these moms in places like Santa Monica and West Hollywood where we're sitting right now, who have, I guess here would be lesbian moms, but anyway, in their yoga pants and everything's just right. And they're raising their kids just right.
Yeah.
And the girls are increasingly sexual in the way they present themselves and dress and behave. And I was just hearing the other night, somebody was telling me, a friend of ours who has a 12-year-old daughter said that she eavesdrops on her daughter's conversations and it's just full of sex talk.
Sure.
And they're dressing more and more like, highly sexualized young women when they're 12 and 13. Simultaneously, the brick wall with the barbed wire on top is still there, right?
Yeah.
And so, boy, that's a complicated culture to navigate.
Well, I think basically from my vantage point here, what you're pointing out, And I think you're overstating to the point of making yourself unhearable, unfortunately, because and it is that the ideas of who you get to have sex with at what age and what constitutes consent is culturally constructed. I 100% agree with you. And I don't think that that's something that's allowed into the cultural conversation at all. And I think that we should, in some ways, fight for that. But I do think that it's also important to see and acknowledge the intense suffering that people go through who have had these experiences as children. And to also acknowledge that maybe that there's something there beyond cultural construct.
Okay.
And additionally, that may just be may be an effect, an unavoidable effect of the cultural construct as well.
Yeah. So this was the next question.
Yeah.
I had for you, which is, what do you tell the person who says they were raped or assaulted or molested?
Yeah.
As a woman, as a child, anything, right? Who are now adults, fully conscious, fully aware, and tell you, it was horrible and damaging and I'm a survivor, but I will always carry this with me and I've always carried it with me and it's affected me in all these ways. And what do you say to them? Because earlier you referenced a book called The Trauma Myth.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering if you're thinking that trauma is a myth, meaning a construct. I tend to think so.
Yeah.
Now, and that's, by the way, I am speaking as someone who has created all kinds of trauma for myself.
Yeah.
I know now that I have constructed all kinds of trauma for myself that has totally damaged me. The trauma has damaged me.
Sure.
But I now am pretty sure that much of it was constructed by me and was unnecessary.
Yeah.
Unnecessary.
Yeah. I mean, I think that trauma is real but over applied. I mean, I think it's good to talk about trauma in terms of people who have been in violent conflict situations.
The question is it a necessary effect of certain incidents?
I think if someone is in a place, nothing is. No, nothing.
Yeah, right.
Nothing is necessary effect. I'll go there with you because you can put two people in combat situations in Vietnam and one of them returns in the same.
That's right.
And one of them returns traumatized and one of them doesn't.
That's right.
But I do think it names symptoms. I think that it names symptoms, and I think that it's properly linked to the naming of symptoms linked to certain kinds of events. So when we talk about trauma, and we say this person has these symptoms and we're noticing that they've stemmed out of a combat situation, I'm happy calling that trauma. When we say that this person has these symptoms and they're linked to his situation fighting with his boyfriend, not even physically fighting, but just, I would say maybe we need to talk about this in a different way for their sake, not to dismiss their pain, but to say, what's the best pathway to healing here? Is it by using the trauma model or not? And that's what Susan Clancy was doing in that book. She wasn't saying, let's dismiss their pain or the violation or whatever. Let's think about the best ways to heal people and to get people to communicate better. But of course, that book was taken as, oh, you're saying that that's not sexual violation or that those kids were, that there's nothing wrong with having sex with kids or whatever. And she was like, no, I'm actually saying we can find better ways to heal people in these situations if we remove the trauma model from these kinds of situations. So I think the word trauma is over applied. Yeah. So you're asking me what I say to someone who has been, as an adult, let's just say as an adult raped, and they're saying I'm a survivor and on this, people need to mediate their experience however they want. What I would do is not tell them how to deal with it, but try to, first of all, that's me. I've been sexually assaulted repeatedly, as a kid. I don't talk about it very much, but I've mentioned it here and there, and I won't talk about the details today. Maybe one day when I write a think piece that pays me, $200 or whatever the fuck people pay to present their most intense stories ever. As an adult, beaten up by my ex-boyfriend, and only saw him once after he broke one of my ribs. I had internal bleeding. He was like choking me. It was all just kind of out of the blue. I was in the hospital the whole day. The next day, I saw him only once after that. And the rib that he broke popped out of place in my body that day. So I know that these experiences, these recapitulations of these experiences are real and unbidden. I didn't do anything. I didn't press on my rib. I saw him and it popped out of place. So I would say, okay, look, yes, there may be damage here, and maybe that damage is not resolvable. Maybe it's not resolvable, or maybe health doesn't come from completely healing and erasing a wound. Maybe it doesn't work that way. Maybe there's something about what we do with this, and also, so I think that's it. I mean, I think I would talk about it with them in an individual case-by-case basis. I think that what we have a bigger conversation to talk about is why these events happen and how we can sort of mediate culture better so that they don't happen without just drawing the line between good, evil, totally destroyed, unhealable, damaged, and not affected at all. I mean, I think that those lines are really damaging.
Yeah. So when I was 33, I started psychotherapy in New York City, and I pretty soon after I started therapy thought that I had experienced terrible neglect and abuse, other things in my childhood, that my childhood was close to a living hell. And for the next 10 years, from the age of about 34 to about 44, I lived almost every day with this in my head, that, oh my God, my childhood was the worst and I am damaged by it. And that's why everything, all my problems are basically the cause of this, or just thinking, just ruminating about how awful it was and how terrible it was. And that occupied much of my life for 10 years. Now, if someone had come to me at that time and said, well, there's this book called The Trauma Myth, and what you're doing is inventing your trauma, and you don't need to have this as an idea, I don't know if I would have punched them in the mouth, but it wouldn't have been terribly helpful, at least in that moment. However, at the base, I think they would have been correct. Because, and I don't have an explanation for this, at about that age, about 44, it just stopped.
Yep.
And I don't even know why. There are certain circumstances of that time that might explain it, but nothing really clear. There's no smoking gun here. I can't figure out why at the age of 44, I just stopped caring about it and thinking about it. And I haven't ever since. It's now 8 years and it's not even a thing anymore. And even the things from my childhood will come up and they pass right by me. I don't care.
Yeah.
So that leads me to believe that, at least for me, the thing that I thought was trauma, or multiple traumas, was all a social construct. And it was the construct, my own construct, maybe with the help of some therapists, by the way, but mostly it was my own construct, was what was making me miserable.
Well,
and I didn't need to have that feeling or that set of ideas.
You're 100% correct about that. Okay. In the sense of, one of my favorite spiritual teachers is this woman, Byron Katie, and look at her and she has like a scarf and like she's drinking tea and stuff, and you just think she's a flake, but then you go see her and you're like, holy shit, like this person is extremely intense, where she had this sort of spiritual awakening that she had no personality for 2 years and had to like sort of reassemble herself, and people like mug her and she's like, if you feel you need to shoot me, go ahead, sweetheart, like she's that kind of person. And she always says, like, look, if I see someone's hand coming toward me to hit me, I'm not an idiot. I know it's coming toward me, and it's here and it's here and it's here. And then it connects and it hits me, and then it's over, But what I can do in my head, what people often do is that they hit themselves with that slap over and over and over and over again. And the fact of the matter is that's a thought. So we need to work on letting go of the thoughts. The difference between suffering and not suffering is a thought.
That's it.
And if you do the work that she says, which is actually very simple, you can really get in touch with that. That said, I think that some things are, and some people have a harder time letting go than others. And, and that there is a responsibility factor in there, but I'm not going to blame somebody. For the most part. What I'm going to try to do instead is say, okay, would you like to be free of this?
You want to say it's a choice. Yes.
Well, that's inherent in the question, right?
Yeah.
But it's a kinder question than saying this is your choice. Our statement is, would you like to be free of this?
Yeah.
Here are some ways that maybe you can be free of it, because it's up to you now. You can't, you can change the past.
It's a really funny thing to think about, right? It's like, so let's say you were in a car accident 10 years ago, right? And fully healed, but you have the memory of it, right? And all the pain afterward and all that, it's still in there in your head. Well, obviously the only thing that's hurting you now is the memory, which is your thoughts.
Right.
And you don't have to have those memories, do you? Is there is Sam Harris going to tell us that we're neurologically wired to have certain memories and there's nothing we can do about it because we have no free will? Maybe he would, but I don't think so. I'm pretty sure that we can stop. That's what I was doing for 10 years.
Well, so
I kept reliving these memories of my childhood and making myself miserable with them.
Yes. So what you can do,
but I didn't have to.
Here's a way of thinking about it. And I don't necessarily 100% subscribe to this, but a way of thinking about it is a sort of, damaging event or whatever. A negative event is the inciting incident in a memory illness. Okay. So something bad happens to you, and that's the infection of your memory, of your recapitulation. And you have to go through a sort of healing process to be able to de-infect yourself of that memory. And people do that in many different ways. It could be therapy. It could be doing art. It could be whatever. There are people who want to be sick, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
that's right.
And some people actually can also even find value in that. They're like, well, I go to this dark place constantly, and that helps me do X, Y, Z.
Well, then we have the added problem of the fact that we now place tremendous social value on being a victim, on being damaged, on being hurt, on being oppressed.
I think that is absolutely that's one of the greatest challenges of our time.
Yeah.
Is the idea that victimhood determines who speaks, who listens, what the theories are, who is valorized.
And this is an entirely Western thing. This is a mostly American thing, but it's a Western thing. You don't have this like valorization of the victim in other cultures. It's very strange.
Yeah, I don't like breaking things down into capitalism, but I think this may be a function of capitalism in some ways. Like, well, just this idea of like, well, you're all fucked, but you're going to find some sort of capital in your being fucked now, right? So like if so many people are poor and have shitty circumstances, maybe you can find some way to like, like sift the gold out through your pan and then just be
many people have literally been paid for being victims.
Exactly.
So, sure. Oh yeah.
Exactly. And so that's why, it's like you have people who have been victims and then they come out of it, and instead of just proclaiming like I was hurt, like they do something really incredible with their knowledge of what had happened to them. And that's what I strive to do,
Pretty much half the books published in the United States are, basically victims' accounts, right?
Right. Totally.
Some sort of another. Yeah.
Yeah. And just because you're a victim, I say this about experience, this lived experience, this concept that somehow lived experience is what we need to speak out of. It's like, all right, dude, like you have a gallbladder. You carry that around with you all day. Do you know anything about your gallbladder at all? No. So like, don't tell me that you can interpret the thing that you have. Right. That's not always true.
Right. But you do have like a magical, you can see into the entire Arab world, right? And you can know what they all want, and Arab history too. Like you know the history of colonialism.
Yes.
Because you're half Arab, don't you?
Well, see,
and most importantly, you know it better than me, no matter how much I study it, don't you?
And isn't that the trauma victim narrative too? I carry it around in my body. right? Like a pain.
You carry history in your body. That's right.
It is true, but so do we all.
Well, yeah. So that was not even an exaggeration of what is said in colleges, right? Today. I mean, universities in America, right? There are certain people who will know slavery, the history of slavery, better than I will, no matter how much I've read about slavery, the history of slavery, and how little they've read because they're black.
Yeah.
It's really something.
Yeah, I'm tired of it, and I think and I'm not tired of it because I'm tired of talking about slavery or racism or anything like that. I'm tired of talking about it in this mode.
Well, it's just such a funny. I mean, obviously we agree on the politics of it, but just like it's just so mystical, right? It's such a funny mystical idea that, right, that you have some like access to knowledge of history from hundreds of years ago because you have some genealogical lineage.
You have an understanding
that you can trace back. Like I know nothing about the history of Ireland, really, even though I'm a historian and even though I'm part Irish, right? Nothing. Zero. Nothing. And I don't claim to have any special knowledge of it. I don't have any special knowledge of Irish American history, really.
There is a weird
that I didn't get from reading.
But there is a weird thing where I feel connected. I'm not Palestinian, but because I'm Arab, I feel connected to certain feelings. Yeah. I feel connected to certain feelings of Syrian people. I am half Syrian, but I don't live there. There is, and I'm not going to say what that is. I'm just going to say I know that there is an evocative thing that happens when I read or hear about certain things. And I'm not willing to dismiss that, but I'm also not willing to use it as my interpretive lens. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what people are sort of have fought against, and now it's just gone way too far. It's like, don't tell me that these feelings aren't real. Okay, great. They're real, right? Or no, they're not real at all. I'm the historian. I can tell you that this is like blah, blah, blah. That's bullshit. Mm-hmm. And I think that those two like kinds of silences and speaking are at war with each other. And it's the wrong way to have the discussion.
Oh, you can feel or think anything you want about slavery or Syria or the history of the Middle East or whatever. Fine. And that's the end of the discussion.
Yeah.
I mean, about that, I'm just saying you don't have to.
Right.
You can think and feel anything you want, no matter what the color of your skin is.
Yeah. I don't know if it's that easy.
How do I know? I think it, well, it's not that easy, right? I mean, of course, because there's acculturation, but how do I know that it's possible? Because look at the people who have particular colors in their skin and look at the diversity of ideas in their heads, right?
Yeah.
It's the entire gamut, right? So clearly, and obviously with Arabs too, right? There's Arabs with every kind of idea imaginable in their heads. There's Syrians who have all sorts of ideas about Assad and about U.S. intervention and about all of it, right? They hate each other. Well, hello, that's what the Civil War is, right? It's a civil war. They're literally killing each other over what it comes down to ideas and cultures, right? So, but sure, no, it's not easy for me. It wasn't easy for me to just like give up on my childhood and just be like, oh, well, it's fine.
Yeah.
Something, I don't know what happened, but it took me 10 years. I guess that's what I was doing. It took me 10 years of processing it. I suppose that's the way I processed it. I'd like to think it wasn't the way I had to process it. I wish I could have done it in like, the express lane, and it could have taken like 6 months instead of 10 years or something. But, so no, I would never say to someone, oh, you drop it, just get rid of it. You were raped 20 years ago. Well, it doesn't have to affect you now, which is, sort of literally true, right? But I understand that people have developed these constructs that are embedded deep within them that are powerful in themselves.
It's not.
It's just that they're the only ones creating them.
It's actually not literally true. And if I said at any point during this conversation that sort of thing was true, I take it back.
Well, what?
And only because this way of like, well, it's actually true that someone could just let go of it. I take all that back. And if I've said anything that was sort of like that, and the reason why
I did
is not, well, I know you did, but I think I agreed with you at one point.
Okay.
But the reason why is the thing that's true, or the thing that strikes me as true, is approaching the other human being with interest. Okay, that to me seems actually true. So it's a gesture. It's not a set of facts or theories that you apply onto the person. So I would just sort of restate it that way. And I will say that there's part of me that finds this concept alluring of like, well, yes, you could let it go if you wanted to. It's 20 years later, get over it, right? And there's a part of me that holds that. But if I bring that to the situation where the person was like, I was raped 20 years ago and it's still affecting me, is it really true in that situation? It's like I'm reporting part of me. I'm reporting a concept, you know?
Sure. Yeah. The memory is real.
Yeah.
It just doesn't have to be. Now, what did you say you would approach a person with interest? What does that mean?
Yeah.
You would approach them with interest. Interest in what?
Interest in their humanity. So so man, like we, and I mean you and I, but I could also expand it to others. Like we have so much interest in being right that we think that it has a moral value to it, right? Like, right? Where we feel we can't be wrong. And this is original sin, essentially. It's like, oh my God, I can't, I'm so fallen, being wrong is so terrible that I have to be right all the time. My concepts have to be right. I have to dominate the other person with facts, or I have to have my ideology win out, or I have to be correct here, blah, 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 blah. It's like, no, actually the thing that is of value and why I sort of backed up in it is a genuine interest, curiosity, and a trying to meet and encounter another human being, or anything else, or the world. But we don't do that, And so the idea of holding the concept and the concept being right, and that's what we really need to bring, that to me actually seems wrong on its own level.
How about this? Are you approaching a person as an explorer rather than a conqueror? Is that it? That you're just curious?
No, because that's still...
And not wanting to change them? Is that what you're prescribing here?
No, I mean meeting someone with warmth,
Okay.
Yeah. I think that might be what we want to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, so that's what I try to do. I try to be an explorer rather than a conqueror, but I'm very much an explorer.
But I mean,
as anyone who knows me,
explorers are conquerors in their own way.
Well, that's the question. Right? Is that true? Is that true?
They can be, but I would rather meet someone and be like, I really, in some way, would like to meet this person. And I don't do that enough, but I would like to do that more. And it's exactly why the identity politics stuff we're talking about is so, it ends up being so cold and decimating, is because it's not about people. It's about identity, which is something completely different.
You know what it's time to do, right?
What?
To ignore them. Not really.
I think it's being,
that's the page it's
dying.
Recently. Yeah. I've just stopped caring.
Yeah.
It helps that I'm out of the university now. A lot, so I really don't need to care.
It's so interesting. I talked to my friend she teaches at a community college, and she is up for a job at an Ivy League school. And I was like, how are you going to deal with this identity politics stuff? And she said, I'm just going to do, because she teaches English, and she said, I'm just going to do a lot of nature writing and a lot of going out and talking about the natural world.
Good luck.
But at this school, it actually would work. But I just found it a really fascinating anecdote. I thought, I mean, even though someone could be like, well, the concept of a tree is constructed, blah, 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 blah.
Yes.
Of course, people can do that. Yeah. But the idea of taking someone out of the realm of that politics, that to me was like such a great solution, because it was a reminder of the rest of the world. The rest of the world exists, beyond these concepts in so many ways.
Yeah. Yeah. Much of identity analysis, I actually agree with, and I use in my own work and my own thinking. It's the politics. It's identity politics that's problematic to me, to use an identity politics word. Yeah. Problematic. Yeah, it's cold, it's mean, it's reductionist by definition.
Yeah.
Right? People are reduced to their identities, which are all social constructions anyway.
Yeah.
Usually, by the way, or almost always, constructions that were used against them. They were created to manipulate, oppress, exploit, demean, you name it.
I'm just tired of ignoring people's pain, man. It's like, or
like Syria was literally invented by Western powers in an effort to help colonize the whole region. I mean, so was Iraq, and so I mean, it's just so to identify as that, it's like, okay, well, Winston Churchill thanks you. for identifying with his thing that he constructed for you.
Yeah. And these identities are new versions of nations, right? Mm-hmm. I feel it's interesting that you keep bringing up Syria, because my sort of connection to this conflict that, with Trump just rebombing Syria.
Just so people know, sorry, your dad was Syrian.
My dad is from Syria.
Is Syrian, yeah. Mm-hmm.
From a village in the mountains of Syria, so outside of Damascus. I've never been to Syria. I don't speak Arabic, but I feel very Syrian, right? In this way that I was very different than the kids I grew up with in my all-white town.
You were treated Syrian.
Yes. Or I woke up to the fact that I was different. Mm-hmm. So in opposition to other people's identities, no one taught me any sports stuff when I was a kid, all that kind of stuff. So
that's what made you gay.
Yeah, exactly. Oh. Being Syrian made me gay.
No baseball. No one taught you baseball. That's what makes you gay.
Oh my God, but see, that sounds like the gayest thing in the world. That's so arousing to me. Is baseball players.
Baseball's arousing. Oh yeah, sure.
So but then but I would get calls from my grandparents, in Syria. There was like not a phone in every house in the village. And so it would be very bad connection. I would hear someone yelling at Arabic, from far away, but it still felt like close to me. My dad would tell me stories about the hyenas near the village that would, they were afraid that they would steal the kids, or they would steal your food or whatever, about the nomadic people, which he called gypsies, although I realize is not the appropriate term, but that's what a lot of people who are from other countries who live near nomadic people use as a translative word to describe those people. So I had all these stories and stuff growing up, and it was really in my imagination. And it's not the Syria that people talk about when they talk about conflict. It's not the images that I have when people talk about. And it's very frustrating to me that whenever anybody brings up Syria to me, it's always about conflict. So it's always like, I'm so sorry what's happening over there, and I'm like, okay, did you ever care about it before then? How sorry are you really? And not in a mean way, not like, did you ever care about it? You don't care about, but more just like, where's this apology coming from? Would you like to know more about this place? Would you like to know more beyond the conflict? Because I can tell you cool stories about, the spirits that my grandparents saw.
Well, there's also an assumption that you have particular politics because your dad was from Syria.
Yeah.
And in fact, there are many Syrians, in fact, I know some who think U.S. intervention is a good thing. They want it, right? I mean, so they're essentializing you when they do that.
Yeah.
Apologizing to you and asking you if you're okay because of the bombing. It's like, well, I mean, actually some Syrians think it's a good thing.
Yeah, right. There's that. They also always ask me if I'm Muslim, which I'm like, no, Syria is not mostly Muslim, right, even before September 11th.
Yeah, so this idea about like using identities or identifying with a thing that was created for you by others to oppress you is quite something, isn't it? Uh-huh. And it happens all the time, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the category of Black, Negro, Arab, those are all creations actually by the people we consider the oppressors of those people. It's amazing. And there's this rush to identify with that thing.
Yeah. And also so people can sell us shit, right? Like there's an identity industry of like,
oh, no kidding.
Yeah. Yeah.
The t-shirts alone would make you rich.
I know.
Yeah. So here's an identity though, I think that you do have, which is, it's an intellectual identity. It's sex radical, I suppose, right? Okay. I mean, I know you have your own particular take on that, but like so you do call yourself a sex radical, and you've written essays on the history of sex radicals.
Yeah.
Fantastic essays. And you've written a essay about yourself, your sort of coming of age, intellectually, sexually, and as a radical, which I love. It's one of my favorite essays. We'll link to it in the show notes. But what is a sex radical these days? Is that such a thing? I mean, so historically it's easy, and you've done this really well in your work, to identify who is a radical, why they were radical in particular moments, in the 19th century or early 20th century or even late 20th century. But now in 2018, first of all, how many sex radicals are there? Are there many in this culture? And what does it mean?
Yeah, there aren't many.
Although, you know what? I think it's growing. I think the number's growing. I'm seeing more and more, especially feminists,
Yeah.
becoming what we used to call sex positive
Oh.
feminists now. Yeah.
Yeah.
I see like this coterie growing.
Yeah, I think that people are becoming more open. So let me just define it, right? So for me, it's a centering
Oh, yeah.
of sex.
Yeah, I love that.
And using that as a sort of way to using the rest of the world in some ways to look at sex, and then kind of reflecting it back in some ways. So in other words, I'm not starting with gender as the way that we need to look at sex, right? That's something else Gail Rubin says in response to that essay. At some point she says, feminism is not able to contain sex any better than, Marxism or whatever. She says something like, it overreaches as a container, right?
That's great.
So we keep turning,
metaphor. Yeah.
we keep turning to feminism.
Yeah, they're all containers. Marxism, feminism.
Yeah.
All ideologies are containers.
Right.
And I love that. That's right. She does say that. Sex spills over.
Yes.
All of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
I love that.
And, generally we turn to
can't be
feminism
contained.
and feminists to describe sex and sexuality, which they're not capable of doing.
It can't
through
be
feminism.
contained.
No,
Yeah,
it
I love
can't.
that.
It
It's
can't be
true.
contained.
I know. That's why it's the constant problem. It is
Right,
the
exactly.
constant problem.
And a threat to people and institutions of power constantly,
That's
right? So for me, it's like, let's start there. Now, actually, a little secret about me is that I don't start there. I have my own set of spiritual occult beliefs that we may or may not get into this episode, but sex is the place where most of my work starts from. And why? Because, and I might have said this on a previous episode with you, but if you ever want to know how someone feels about freedom, start talking about sex. And the reason why is because sex is the most individual thing about us. It is the absolute nexus of every factor of our lives make up sex in our sexuality and our desires and our desire sets. So unlike anything else, it goes deeper than anything else. And so I think that we learn about individuation, individuals, individual freedom when we start talking about sex more than anything else. And you can see where people's lives are so quickly when you do that. Like, you can people talk all they want about, how they want equal rights for everybody or whatever identity they want, or how they want, clean water and air or whatever. And then you bring some sexual factor in. Like, don't you think that people should have, access to this and this and this sexually, or be able to imagine what they want sexually? And immediately this like reflexive, intense, as we've talked about quite a bit in this episode, kicks in, and you suddenly realize what the limits of their ideas of freedom
What's
are.
the response usually you get? I mean, to me, what I hear is sort of like it's either dismissive. It's like, oh, that's frivolous. That's not as important
Yeah.
as the fact, Conner, clean air and clean water. You
Right.
think that's the same as having access to sex? Come on.
Right. Totally.
We know it's important. I mean, it's a powerful argument. It's won over most people. The clean air and clean water is more important than sex.
Okay.
Right. But that's usually what you get, right? It's either it's dismissive or it's worse. It's that, sex is kind of bad and you're kind of a bad person for being preoccupied with it when we have dirty air and dirty water.
Right. So clean air and clean water will never be related to individuality in the same way as sex, right? Which is why it's easy. It's easy for people to talk about universalities because they lend themselves so easily to putting people in power over everybody else, right? And that's not an argument against clean air and clean water, but it's to illustrate that it's a lot more difficult to talk about the freedom that people have sexually.
No ideology can contain it. No politics can contain it.
No, it can't. Because it contains politics.
No state can contain it.
No. Nothing.
That's
Nothing
right.
can contain sex
That's right.
except maybe spirituality, which is
And
my other thing.
that is why I love it.
Yeah. Me too.
And that is why my politics are the same as yours in that way.
Yeah, I think ultimately at
Yes.
the base that they are. It just can't. There's no way to contain it except by killing everybody, right? You know, like you could just eliminate. But even then, because sex existed before life, so sex, the genetic exchange, exchanges of pieces of genomes between things was happening in viruses, which are not technically alive before they hit a host. So that existed before life existed.
When the scientists, though, take over and are able to engineer our brains, that's what they will eliminate, though. They will eliminate the sex drive.
Right.
Guaranteed. Because it makes us very inefficient also. Right? Our sexual desires make us very inefficient.
Well, there are ways in which I think there's a book that is great and infuriating at the same time called Testo Junkie, and Paul Preciado. I always say the name wrong, but the author has this whole thing about how economies now are really based around these sort of like bodily sexual exchanges. So Viagra, porn, Truvada hadn't come out yet, but like cosmetic surgery, all these sort of hormonal interventions, all these sort of new ways of dealing with like the body are the way that the economy itself is going, which I think is interesting.
It's productive.
Yes.
It's not efficient.
Oh, it's not efficient.
Right? Because that doesn't build bridges.
Yeah.
And that doesn't write computer programs.
Right.
That just creates new products, right? That we just use to pleasure ourselves with.
Yeah.
There's nothing produced that's socially valuable from it. To them, I mean, this is their argument, right? But it is in a way. It's right. It's not efficient. It doesn't create a transportation system that delivers people from point A to point B,
right,
quickly, right?
Yeah, it's a consciousness. It's so deeply related to consciousness. So when people frame the war on drugs, and I think this was a good move, as a war on consciousness, the war against sex is the oldest war on consciousness that's ever existed, because you alter your states of consciousness when you engage with your desires, or you engage with pleasure, you engage with sex in any way. And that is constantly being mediated, legislated against, controlled, all that kind of stuff. So I think we need to view it those ways. Think about how weird it is that like at any moment in time, for free, you can make yourself feel pleasure, right? Think about how fucking threatening that is to everything that exists. So
are you talking about the ancient art of onanism?
Yes, exactly. Yes. Well, for women, it's something else, but yeah, but also,
Wait, was onanism only about men?
Well, Onan spilled his seed in the Bible.
Oh,
so
I didn't even know that. Okay.
But think about that also. Why? There's this image of poor people constantly fucking and not having any control over their desires, right? Because it's free, right? And so controlling sex also means controlling poor people.
So that's the right-wing image of poor people, is that they're fucking all the time and making children.
Yeah.
The left-wing image of poor people is they never have sex.
Oh.
They're just suffering all the time. They're just suffering and working and suffering and working and being imprisoned and being killed and suffering and suffering and being poor. They never have sex and never have pleasure. They don't want it because they're noble.
Right. So both versions of what the poor are the sort of projected versions of what those people actually view as themselves.
Yeah. It's whatever it is. Yeah, maybe it's whatever it is. It's quite something though, right? The poor people, like they can't, it's like the images of them are just completely skewed.
No, you're right. So I think centering sex does a lot of things for us, but primarily for me, what it does is it reveals how you feel about the individual. And the easiest way to see this is like you're walking down the street with your friend, you point out someone that you think is hot, and your friend is like, ugh, him, right? Immediately, like embedded in our everyday discourse, even with the people we love, is this idea that their desires are unbridgeable. We can never understand them. And so we immediately demonize them for it. Or like, someone tells you about a sexual act that they like being, peed on while they're blindfolded or something like that. And you get repulsed by it. And it's like, and very often that repulsion is like, it's just fucked up, man. That's just screwed up. I can't believe you want to do that. And it's like that intensity of feeling around something that is pleasurable for someone that is based on the fact that you will never allow yourself to know that other person as an individual or try to understand them or try to understand their sort of desire set. So even down just to the level of conversation with people that we care about, much less how it's echoed in the state and how the state leverages that and reinforces that constantly, you know?
So, and what would be your response to your friend saying so-and-so is hot who you think is not hot?
Oh, tell me what you think is attractive about them. That's what I would say. I would open up the conversation.
Approach them with interest.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Curiosity.
Yeah.
You'd want to explore their mind, wouldn't you?
And
Conner?
and you know that like,
and that's not conquering at all.
My friends that I've said that to many times, they're hip to it at this point. They're like, oh, you think that person's ugly, you know, but at least I'm opening up the conversation.
Can we talk about that for a second?
Yeah.
You and your friends. Like, I've never seen you hang out with your friends. Like, what goes on? Because you're a weird one, you know?
I don't, my friends, I think, are the people that
Who are your friends, first of all? Who do you hang out with?
You mean by name or just?
No. Like,
they're all interesting people. They all are trying. Most of them are trying to do somewhat of.
Is it mostly gay men?
No,
Okay.
no.
Is it?
There are some gay men, but like, no. It's all over the place identity wise.
Even though you're a gay man living in West Hollywood.
This isn't West Hollywood.
Well,
No,
close
it's
enough.
not. It's Hollywood.
Hollywood. It's close to West Hollywood. It's walking distance to West Hollywood.
God, I can't even.
I'm trying to make you
not
gay.
living there.
You're gay, goddammit. Let me say that a few more.
It's close to the Castro. It's in the
hundred
same
more times.
state as the Castro.
You could take a plane to the to the Stonewall Inn. You could get there. So you're gay. You hang out with women?
You're on a gay podcast right now, and I'm like, it's your podcast. You're like, yes, but I've had gay people on you.
That's right.
So
no, I'm actually mostly interested in, because this is my experience, right? And just being intellectually just a complete weirdo all the time.
Yeah.
Right. Not ever agreeing with people.
Yeah.
On most things who you're with, right?
Yeah. I mean,
That's
I
my
hang out with
experience.
people who have very often have
And
intellectual projects.
And honestly, I only brought up the gay men because even within that world, maybe even especially in that world, you're a weird person politically, intellectually, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, constantly isolated. That's how I feel.
Right? Is that true?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Even with some of my friends, but they get me and they know that that's true and they're cool with it, you know? So yeah, I still feel like the weirdo, but that's all right. That's fine.
To everybody, that's pretty much every guest on this podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
And the host.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
So, and I mean, I think, you know, the people that I love spending time with are ones that want to have conversations like this with me, you know? So, I mean, I don't do it all the time with them, you know, sometimes I just want to go see a movie or, you know, chill out, but, I don't really do anything. I'm like extremely boring from the outside because this is it. It's like I read, I have conversations, and I have sex with people. It's it.
You talk about having sex a lot.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Your Twitter feed.
And I have sex a lot.
Your notorious Twitter feed, which some people have told you to shut down or at least to modify.
But we can just say who that was.
I have
want?
No.
No?
I have had. You can do that on your own time. I have had the experience that person complained about, which was sitting in an airplane, scrolling through my Twitter, and there's Connor's ass being fucked by a large penis.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And, you know, scrolling quickly past that image so that the little old lady next to me can't see it. And my face feeling really hot and flushed suddenly, which I guess is just embarrassment. But
so that's a moment of being a sex radical.
You're radical, man. No, exactly.
Yeah.
So your position on this, so to speak, is the best. But even for me, it's hard. Well, it's hard for anybody, right?
It was difficult for me too. Yeah.
Well, what is your position on that?
You mean like
what should I do? What should our response be to that? Like how should we feel about it? Like what?
Slow your breathing.
Yeah.
And just, if you want to take a look at the picture, look at it, you know, and take the risk of the person sitting next to you. You know, I mean, you can plan your response. If the flight attendant comes up and is like, "Are you looking at pornography?" You'd be like, "Oh gosh, sorry, I just had my phone."
Is it actually illegal?
Like,
is it actually against the rules?
Yes,
Airlines have a rule against it.
I mean, it's against the law, right? To have pornography in public that people can see without their consent, right? You could be like,
is it really? Wait, it's illegal to view
well, what if there's a
pornography?
kid sitting behind you?
No, but is it actually illegal to view pornography in public?
In some places, yeah, sure.
Yeah, I'm sure.
What if there's a kid behind you? That's the challenge always, right? That's where they'll always take it. Because even if there's not, someone will say that. What if there were a kid behind you?
It's funny, I'm not afraid of the children. See, because this is why I'm Roman Polanski or whatever.
This
but no,
is why
I'm
you're a
actually
monster.
Women. It's women, especially older women. Like
so examine that in yourself. So I would say you don't have to do anything in that moment, but after that moment happens, examine that moment.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, that's really interesting because I do have a thing about older sort of authority figure women. And it's not a good thing. And so maybe that's what that's about.
Your mother.
That's who I think of.
Yeah,
except that she wouldn't have a problem with it. It's interesting. But she is that person, but she's actually complete sex positive, very good on this stuff.
So I think it gets to the heart of the matter.
It's all the school principals who oppressed me as a kid. Actually, that's what I think of.
That they'll find you out somehow. So your teacher will see that you're doing it and report you to the principal.
Assistant principals in particular, because they were the heavies, they were the disciplinarians. All women.
So I want people to take these moments where they have these sort of knee-jerk reactions to sex in any way and examine them. And you might not be able to do it in the moment, but think about where those feelings came from. They're not just personal. So even if it were, say, a reflexive action to the memory of your teacher catching you one day, like jerking off behind your social studies book or something like that, you think about where her response came from, why that was a mandate, why that had to happen. And why these laws have been and codes have been brought to us. It's very strange if you think about it. It's completely bizarre that I walk around, if I showed my dick in public, I would be arrested, right? If you want to understand how deep this kind of stuff runs in our culture, think about the fact that if you show every single part of your body, totally fine, except really one area, and then it's prison and sex offender registry.
Right.
Like that's
forever.
That's crazy.
Forever. Yeah.
That's crazy, right?
You're on the registry forever.
So anybody that wants to dismiss sexuality in light of clean air, and just be like, well, these issues are important, but not this one. Think about how intensely reflexive those responses are and what the punishments are for those kinds of things in our culture. And suddenly you can see, not only are you not free because the law says so, but you're not free because you do not even allow yourself to imagine these scenarios. And then when you do, even if you do imagine them, you're shamed, right? And even if you get past shame somehow, maybe another version of shame will creep in, right? So there are just layers and layers and layers and layers of repression around sexuality. And it's really important to be able to address those on a personal level, a political level, and a social level. And, sex radical people, I would say they do that in multiple ways. They might center sex as the foundation of their politics. They might use sex in a new and surprising way. Like there's this guy, Pascal Beverly Randolph, I read about, who he was a friend reportedly of Abraham Lincoln's, and he was this he was I believe half black and half white, and he wrote these books on using sex to end slavery, using sexual magical power to end slavery and to free people. So if you start thinking about sex in these kind of new ways, that for me means you're a sex radical, because it's the foundation of your tactics in some ways as well. What is not to me a sex radical is someone who's like, this is how you put a condom on a banana, everybody. I'm going to show college kids how to educate themselves. There's nothing in that to me that can't be immediately just sort of like co-opted, or isn't already like sort of a problem in certain ways. I'm glad that people are sex positive. I'm glad that people have good feelings and want to spread good feelings about sex, but that's not what I'm talking about when I talk about being a sex radical.
Yeah. Who are the greats historically? Who are your favorites?
Charles Fourier, the utopianist who based his entire utopian vision on pleasure. So imagining a universe that runs on principles of pleasure, that's a huge project. I think someone like people might be surprised at some of the people that I choose as sex radicals. I think Jacques Lacan is a sex radical in the sense that he's a psychoanalyst and notorious postmodern philosopher who sort of resurrected Freud and re-centered sex and desire in a way that I thought was really profound, that underlied all his political understanding, philosophical understanding of the world. I think Ida Craddock, she was someone that during the Comstock era of our country, which is this era of mass suppression of any quote unquote obscene materials, she was teaching courses to women on how to feel sexual pleasure. She was defending belly dancing. Right. She said she was married to an angel, and that she had sex with her angel husband.
Like late 19th century. Right?
Yeah.
This is
the
height of the Victorian era, the Comstock era.
Yeah, it's a bad time to be.
The worst time for sex.
Yeah,
ever. Anyway, yeah. I mean, you could say it's one of the best in some ways because the repressed return.
Yes, right? Sure, right. But I mean, hounded to death by Anthony Comstock. I mean, he had it in for her. Literally hounded to death by him. Huh.
Wow.
And she's another great example. Something that's interesting about a lot of these people is that they have ties to the occult, which is something that another thing that I'm really interested in. And I didn't just select them because they were occultists, because not all of them were, but there's a long tradition of sexual liberation meeting occultism in history. There's a great book called Magia Sexualis by Hugh Urban, I think his name is, that sort of traces how these social movements tied into the social movements of sexual and gender liberation tie into the occult, and how we should how we should pay more attention to that. But part of that is because occultists very often believe also in the radical power of the individual. And so that's where sex and the occult come together. Yeah.
I was going to say, so, your politics is individualistic.
Yeah.
Right?
It's individualist.
Sex is
yes.
about individual freedom and pleasure and desire.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's why the socialists don't like you entirely.
Because essentially I'm an individualist anarchist.
Yeah. So that's never going to go over well because they're collectivists.
They like me now, I mean, I've been
they haven't
trying
had this conversation with you.
Well, right? I've been trying to build a lot of bridges, between what I do and socialists, because I think that socialism is become convinced that it is actually a necessary step culturally. I know it took me a long time to come to that realization. We may have other avenues available to us, but it seems like it might be the next thing that has to happen to give us the space to do something better.
The first thing they will regulate is your dick, Conner. The first thing.
Not if I create enough of these conversations first.
You spend too much time talking about sex, having sex, when you could be out there building roads.
I'm totally open to being to other
and
possibilities.
Cleaning the air and the water.
I know.
We need that. Do we not? We need that. And you're not doing it.
That's okay though. I'll resist them in this too. I mean, it's
all right. I look forward to that fight.
They're not going to make it worse. I don't think. It's pretty fucking bad, man.
Oh, they could definitely make it worse. Just study the histories of the countries that were socialist.
Yeah, all right.
In any way.
All right. Yeah.
But anyway.
Listen,
okay.
don't listen, dear listeners of Unregistered podcast, don't brand me a socialist because I'm not. I just think that there might be a pathway through that includes socialism.
Yeah.
Far be it from me to defend it on this podcast of all places.
Yeah. No, it's okay. I mean, it's what we do. It's what we do here. Yeah, no, it's fine. I just think it's funny. To me, it's like this sex is like this virus that just gets into any political ideology, any political regime, libertarianism for that matter. And I'm not a libertarian,
Sure.
But libertarianism, I mean, it's got its own problems with sex, and I think for good reason. We've talked about this, I think. Right?
Yeah.
It's like there's an efficiency in capitalism that is valorized, right? by a lot of libertarians. And I'm telling you, sex is not good for economic efficiency. It's good for productivity, but it's not good for efficiency.
Well, the thing that I said the last time we talked about this, but it was on my show, so I'll now say it on yours, is that libertarians have externalized their desire into the market. So they think, so when I'm talking about what desire is before and how it runs everything, they have just projected that and called it the market. And they think that it's all just going to sort of like organize everything. But in fact, it's just a projection of,
Well, the good libertarians, those I hang out with, would say the market is simply the most efficient means of providing what we want, which can include sex.
Yeah.
So they're actually pretty good on that.
But that's still what I'm saying.
Oh, okay. Well, no. I think you're flipping it. But
no, it's still...
You're saying that the market is the desire, or is the pleasure, or the sexual pleasure.
No, the desire. So, yeah.
And I'm saying that they're saying that it is simply, the market is simply the best means to get you what you want.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, okay. Then we're good.
Okay.
Then we're good. Yeah. Yeah. I don't want to call that libertarianism for a lot of reasons. I just think individualism is fine, but not just individualism. You're also privileging, in a way, desire, right? Because there are some people who just don't care about sex as much as you do. That's fine. I'm with you.
Everybody cares about sex as much as I do.
Okay.
They just...
That's a hell of a claim.
Well, the reason I say that is because everything's sexual. So it doesn't really matter.
I mean, I certainly think so.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's hard to prove that. But yeah, I mean, there's just a choice. How about this? You're valuing sex highly, right? As do I.
Yeah.
Because I like it, period. That's it. I just like it. That's it. So I put it at the top of my priorities. And that is what I decided will shape my politics, because your politics, I think, should be built around what you want in life, shouldn't it?
But I'm not calling sexual intercourse sex here. I'm saying sex is something that is always running in all the things that we do all the time. So when I say
sexuality,
no, sex. So
the act.
Yes. So sexuality is this sort of like combination of factors that make your view of sex, okay, and your experiences of sex. And everybody has a right to talk about sexuality from their own vantage point, from their lived experience, because everybody has, different sexuality. That's fine. When we're talking about sex, which is something much more complicated, sex for me, you could almost replace the word desire for sex. It's in all our gestures, all our movements, all the things we do, not just obvious things like inserting the key into the fucking car and then, grasping the wheel with our hands and leaning back and letting the road, just entering into the weird vaginal tunnel of the road. We could mean it in that Freudian sense. And I do think that that's important. But I also think, one, sex is the thing that created us. Okay. Mm-hmm. So it's necessarily, then, if we want to talk about something being in our bodies and following us around our whole lives, is necessarily the thing that sort of pulses through every single action that we do, because it's our creator. But finally, what I mean is that everything that happens in life has a sexual or erotic aspect for us that we're sometimes conscious of or not conscious of. We can see this sort of show up in various moments, like when you're a teenage boy and someone says the word linoleum, and for some reason that word has a certain feeling in your ear and you get a hard on from it, right? Whoa. And it's just such a crazy thing. Like someone says,
now that is perverted,
right? But
are you telling? Were you turned on by linoleum?
But no, I was trying to come up with something that sounded completely asexual. Like I'm saying, like, we know from the things that end up sort of surprisingly arousing us, these are the moments where we can see that sex isn't everything. When we feel bodily sensations from just being out in the sun, when we are working and we're exerting our bodies, and we're feeling certain sensations there that may have an erotic or an arousing charge. I don't just mean sexual intercourse. I mean sex. Sex pulses through every single thing we do in one way or another. And we could go much, much deeper on this, and I could get super theoretical. and talk about how I think sex is a sort of negative space that generates everything that exists out of it, but that's its own.
Is it that we are
conversation.
always? Is it that we are always pursuing or repressing it?
That's one part of it. But that it's also always.
That's what I would say.
It's also always showing up for us whether we are consciously pursuing or repressing it.
Yeah,
right.
I think that's right.
Yes.
I think that we are always in seeking it, doing things in service of it, or seeking consciously or unconsciously to stop it.
And it informs the way that we interpret our experiences. So if I am trying to buy some, I don't know why I keep using textiles, but if I'm trying to buy a granite counter for my kitchen, right? And there's one that's more appealing to me than the other, there is an aspect of that appealing attraction or repulsion to certain things that is linked to desire, right?
Yeah.
That's conditioned by that. And the same is true for the kinds of jobs we want, the kinds of activities that we want to play through our days. Those kinds of things there's always this sort of little tuning fork in the background that's trying to align the frequency with our sexual desire. And so I think it guides us in that way. So I think it's in everything. It's a foundational aspect of being human. And so much more.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I'm going to try. I'm not going to end this podcast with a sex joke.
Okay.
Or a double entendre or anything like that. I'm just going to end the podcast.
You're just going to end it.
I'm just going to end it.
All right.
Not even, yep, that's it. Not even going to mention any words that are synonymous with end. I'm just going to end the podcast. Okay?
What about me though?
I'm going to say thank you, Conner.
Oh, okay.
Oh, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a double penetration joke. No,
Wait, do you guys do that? No, you don't do that. Oh yeah, I guess you do.
Quadruple.
Yeah. Okay, there we go. Thank you. It's always great to talk to you.
It's been a pleasure.
Have a lovely day.
You too.
Goodbye, Conner.
Bye.
This was the Unregistered podcast, and I'm Thaddeus Russell. To support the show and become a member of the Unregistered community, go to unregisteredunderground.com. To get information and to buy tickets to the Renegade University weekend events in Los Angeles and Washington, D.C., go to thaddeusrussell.com/courses. Thanks for listening.